Hello, welcome to the episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today we had Paul Edwards, the Managing Director of Jonesco based in Preston. I absolutely couldn't wait to have Paul on the show. He's someone I spoke to a few years ago when I was actually planning the podcast, and I actually had Paul in the mind to interview because he is someone who is inspirational, a superb storyteller, someone you're going to learn a heck of a lot from regarding management, training, mentorship. This is bringing it back to what our classes, the old school Manufacturing Leaders podcast type episode, where we literally talk about accountability, expectations, vision, strategy. It's one of those episodes where you're gonna leave it really thinking about your team, your management, your style, but he actually gives people so many tangible tips and improvements. You're going to self-reflect and you're going to be a better leader, I can promise you, just from listening to this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and at times forgot I was on a podcast and was just thinking about my team, my own leadership style, and how can I improve. So I'm really passionate about this one, and I know you're going to love it. So please sit back, listen or watch the episode. Please just click that like and subscribe. It means the world to me and helps us grow the channel. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. A warm welcome today to Paul Edwards, the MD of Jonesco, based in Preston. Paul, someone I spoke to probably 3 years ago as a candidate, and at the time I think I was just starting the podcast and thought he would be fantastic. And at quite a lot of times elapsed, and we finally got him on. So it's going to be a great episode. And you are a man who has many professions within the industry of manufacturing and management. So I'm looking forward to this. How are you, Paul?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. I was just finishing a cough suite, as I explained earlier. I've had a bit of a cough over the weekend, so I was trying to clear me my vocal cords, ready for all the questions you're going to ask me. But it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, we've spoken on and off for some time, and yeah, I do have quite a wide, varied influence in across manufacturing. So I'm looking forward to a good chat.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So, same question I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. What does it mean to you to be a leader? What do you say?
Yeah, this is a good question because if I think about me personally, I think I had sort of some initial sort of leadership traits, characteristics, from being a young kid. And I think, everyone has their own personality, and some people are more suited to leadership, some aren't. But that's not just enough in itself. Obviously you then shape yourself, you get coach mentored, you have experience, and you gradually go through life, and you emerge, don't you, as a sort of leader. And then, or someone spots those leadership talents and coaches and nurtures and brings them out. So for me personally, being a leader, it's not about reaching a level of your career where you're sort of in a position of power or command and control. It's really about being able to bring the best out in others, either individuals or businesses or organizations. And it's almost like you feel that you have a duty to do that. Someone spotted the potential in me over the years. I was lucky to have a really good education, went through college and university, had some really good career, had some great jobs, worked for some great people, learned things as I've gone along, taken little bits from here, taken little bits from there. And then I've sort of supported people through their careers, and I've taken a lot of satisfaction from that. I used to work for a guy who used to say, one thing I love about you, Paul, is you support the underdog. And what he meant by that was, if I saw the potential in someone, I would go out of my way and give them a lot of my time to coach, mentor, and develop them on the assumption that that's what they wanted. So I kind of feel that from a personal point of view, being a leader is putting something back. I'm a massive fan of British manufacturing, and everything that does for the economy. And that's why I sort of mix in the circles I mix with manufacturing organizations such as Make UK. That's why I do the work I do for Human Alchemy, to help others and give them the benefit of everything I've had the benefit of. And it's almost like you feel you've got a responsibility to do that, a duty to do that. It's not all about take, so that then you can become this powerful leader and earn a big salary and have a great career. It's about learning along the way and then passing on the benefits of that learning to others.
Yeah, a great answer. Where do you think that comes from in you? Because not everyone has that inbuilt sort of desire to not necessarily not help people, but you go that one step further. And you mentioned yourself that underdog mentality. You know that is, I would say, a step further than most your traditional leader. Where do you think it comes from for you?
I I think it's probably got to come out of the fact that both my parents were teachers and in very difficult environments. So my mum taught deaf children. My dad used to work in special schools. So they had to overcome some real obstacles, and I could see them get a huge satisfaction from it. And actually, my wife is a teacher, and she's one of those teachers that I really admire and respect in that she really cares about the student's outcome. And you can see she's not just turning up to do a job to come home and then, and that pay the bills. It's an absolute passion, and it's the satisfaction and the personal reward and feeling of a sense of achievement when you see someone deliver and deliver to their potential. And I've mentored people within organizations in the last business I've worked for where there was a young lad who had huge potential, great engineer, and he said, Paul, to be honest, I wasted my education. I was a young lad. I was interested in going out with my mates. I wasn't interested in school. And he said, and now I regret it. And I could see this huge level of potential in him. And I said, well, do you know what? We're going to sponsor you to do an HND to go out and day release. And he went from being an operator on the shop floor making parts to being, one of our best design engineers, design and development engineers. And, it was great to see him personally develop and that level of sort of gratefulness that he had to the fact that I'd taken so much time to help him. But he was a great asset to the business. So it was an absolute win-win.
Yeah.
And he's still doing well to this day. And I've seen that before. So I love to see people achieve. And when you see that potential in someone and that you've helped bring it out, but then also the benefit that has to the organization that they work for or their families as well. I've seen I've advised people that then, it's made their family really proud of them and they've undervalued themselves or put themselves down or trying to live up to what somebody else wants them to be in an organization that might be quite negative, where people don't want to see their peers succeed. And then I've talked to them and said, well, how would your wife feel about this? How would your kids feel about if you achieve this? And, they've done it for them and the satisfaction that gives is huge.
Yeah. And it's a great example that with with the teaching side because they're very transferable, really, in terms of what you do and what we do and what teachers do. Because, like I say, you're guiding people through often, not always, but often the early stage of their career. When it's and helping them with a set of skills and often challenging circumstances. So it's a really good way of looking at it. And it's another reason why, for me, people can move into different industries and utilize the
Yeah.
skills they've got. They can't be pigeonholed into just one industry, which I guess, well, teaching in particular is a lot of reason why people leave the teaching industry because of stress, but then go on to do great things because of the lessons they've learned, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or the other way around, I've seen people be good in businesses and then they've gone into teaching. It takes a certain character and characteristic, and I don't think I quite have the patience to be a full-time education. But it's when you see someone that wants to learn and develop. It's all very well saying coaching and mentoring, but if that person you're coaching or mentoring just wants to tick a box, they're never going to achieve it. But
Yeah.
if you can see they genuinely want to improve and develop, then great, let's put the investment in.
Somebody mentioned that as well about you've worked with a number of great leaders and great people. Sometimes there's debate for now in terms of do you stay in a company and progress? Is it now still a positive thing to see 30, 40 years of service for someone, or actually is it better to try to move on to different companies and try new things and work with different managers and different people and different cultures? Given the fact you've had experience with working with a lot of people, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's quite a tricky question because they do say that people never leave a bad job, they leave a bad boss.
Mhm.
And believe me, I've worked for some bad bosses, and that's made me want to leave an organization. But then the boss has been changed before I've had to do that. Um, Culture is really important. I mean, certainly in manufacturing, traditionally it's been a quite an old-fashioned sort of command and control, top-down hierarchy. But I think that's changed a lot now, and a lot of businesses are waking up to that. So I think where people are in a business where they're empowered to do their job, they're given clear expectations, they're given regular feedback, they're given the career opportunities. Yeah, and you don't always get those opportunities. Businesses like Jonesco, 23 million turnover. We're not like a great big corporation that can have loads of people in a pool ready to take over from someone. So sometimes there aren't those immediate opportunities. So sometimes, yes, for someone to develop, if they're really ambitious, they might have to move company. But I always say to people, don't rush those things. Sometimes people chase the money, or they sort of say, oh yeah, but this job's going to be much better. At the end of the day, the grass sometimes is always greener, isn't it? Was actually where you are, you're better off, provided you're not in a toxic culture and you're in a culture where you're empowered to do your job. You know what's expected of you. You give them regular feedback. You give them the tools and training to do the job. Then if you have a degree of ability and the right attitude, then you will thrive in that environment. And if ultimately, you don't get the career aspiration you want, well, as long as you've paid it back and feel that you've been there long enough to have done that company, justice and given them every opportunity, then it's a simple conversation. Look, I've been here, say, 5 years. I think I've achieved all that I can achieve. I think it's time for me to move on, to try something different, to go for that bigger job. So yeah, so it's a tricky one. It really depends on, individual circumstances and the company you're working for. But yeah, I would certainly say if anyone was in an environment where they're not empowered to do their job, they're just told what to do. It's quite a toxic culture. That those cultures are very hard to change and will take a long, long time to change. And either an individual might be able to help change that culture, but if not, then you probably would be looking to leave. But I think that's less and less now. Certainly in manufacturing, I see it less and less.
Yeah, same. I agree. I know you've had a lot of experience working with lots of different companies, and I want to pick your brains on some of this stuff because I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned that you've obviously learned along the way. Vision being one of them, because I'm quite interested in that vision and that strategy piece. In terms of when you're either going into a new business yourself or you're advising the business piece, how important would you say having a vision is, and how you then reverse engineer that into sort of long-term or perhaps even shorter-term goals, would you say?
So in answering that question, I'd ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine there's a guy or a girl sitting in a car. They're just about to go somewhere. You don't know where they're going. They're just about to drive. They don't know if where they're going to end up is better than where they are now. They've got no idea how they're going to get there. They're just literally going to drive aimlessly. Would you get into the vehicle with that person?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. Yeah, yeah.
And yet that's what a lot of businesses and organizations do on a daily basis. And sometimes they get lucky because they have very capable people who kind of know what they should be doing. But without that clear, compelling vision, the people within the organization don't really know where they're going or where the business is ultimately going. And that's quite a hard environment for people to work in. The longer term vision is something, and when I say longer term, I mean 3 to 5 years, is something that can really excite people and feel they want to really be part of it, as long as it's genuine and authentic. A lot of businesses wordsmith their visions. The senior management get together in a room, spend a couple of hours, and they go, "We've got this great vision," and out it goes. It's very, very hard to get right. And how I did it with my team was I asked them all to write an article in 5 years' time that they wanted to see written about Jonesco when we'd achieved the sort of the financial targets and aspirations of the directors and the owners. And then we boiled that down to some core themes. And eventually, over time, we got it down to 2 or 3 sentences, because a vision isn't a strapline or a tagline. It is a statement that says, in 3 or 5 years' time, this is what we want to be. And when you then have that, you've really got to communicate it and make sure that people in the business are excited by it. Once you've got that, you can start to get people pulling in the right direction. To answer your question about strategy, again, I use another analogy. So if we go back to the driving one, so you're not driving aimlessly now. You've decided this weekend you're going to, the weather's going to be nice, so you're going to drive down to Brighton, for example, for a weekend. So how you're going to get there is your strategy, and that's your sat nav. And what the reason why I say it's a sat nav is because you've got to determine the route that you're going to go. Are you going to go by car? Are you going to go by train? Are you going to go by bus? But then plans change, so you might have decided that you're going to go on the train, but the train's cancelled, or there's going to be an engineering work. So now you're going to drive. So your strategy is always evolving. That's why I use that sat nav analogy, because it's always updating. Some businesses go straight to strategy to tick a box. We've got a strategy, but without that vision, well, okay, we're going to drive. Where are we going? Well, we're kind of going in that direction. People can't visualize, in the long term where it is they're going. And if you have a strategy that's continually changing, sometimes people in your organization think you don't know what you're doing, because it's like, well, 1 minute you've told us to do this.
Yeah.
Now you've told us to do something completely different. So if I go back to that sat nav analogy, yeah, no, we're still going to Brighton for the weekend, but instead of going by train, we're now going by car. And oh, that motorway's shut because there's been an accident. So now we're going to have to take a detour around this way. So that is ever evolving. Too many organizations have a strategy, and all it is it goes into a drawer. Yeah. So, we make sure our strategy document, and it's basically a narrative that describes how at this point in time we think we're going to get to our vision. It's always changing because we're adding a bit more meat on the bone, or we might hit an obstacle and change. So every sort of 3 to 6 months, we sit down as a team and review it and reissue it and review it and reissue it, because you've got to stay agile and things are changing, but the vision's still exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that's a great exercise. Just out of interest on that particular exercise, were there some answers that surprised you? Because I guess I imagine there are a lot of people who got involved with this. Is that something that you had some left field ones and sort of actually changed the strategy for the better times?
Well, we had one of my senior managers cheated and used AI, but I gave him the credit of using his initiative, and that's another subject. At least he used a modern tool.
Yeah.
But actually, no, I was really pleased with how they all embraced it, and they seemed to really enjoy it. And because we'd done so much work initially before I asked them to do that, so we'd gone back, because you've got to start with your mission, which effectively is why do you exist as a company? What is your core purpose? What is it that you do? Now, Jonesco is a privately owned company, and obviously we're there to make the family money. It's privately owned family business. We're there to make the family money. So why would we avoid stating that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not just purely for that. It's also, to create jobs, to, pay back the community. We do charity work in the local community, etc. So it doesn't just exist for that purpose, but that is one of the reasons why it exists. So we've just stated that and made it very clear. What are the core technologies? It's all about plastic molding. So let's state that and make a very simple statement about why does this business exist? So we've got that sort of core purpose that helps us make decisions when we're looking at new opportunities. Does this kit fit with our core purpose or not? Then the vision comes in. So we'd already done quite a lot of work before I got to that vision piece. So I think people were already starting to formulate in their own minds where they saw the company going. So the writing the article was almost like a bit of fun to the point we'd already got quite a long way in the process. And it's like, right, I'd like you all to think about this. We know financially what the aspirations of the owners are. We know why we exist. But when we've achieved it, imagine yourself there in 5 years' time. You're picking up a relevant magazine about our industry. What do you want to see written? And the common themes were all there. There was a lot of similarities. So I guess the biggest surprise, to answer your question, was just how aligned it actually was, and that there wasn't any of these left field people completely misenvisaged or not misenvisaged, who got completely different ideas to the rest of us. It was the common themes were quite uncanny.
Which probably means that they did have some form of a strategy without it being documented. I imagine that culture business probably has had that before, but just needed it all to tie together, which is interesting.
Absolutely right.
It segues into almost the data and the the KPIs piece, and I still think I'm seeing more and more of this now within manufacturing and companies using data, you got Power BI, all this type of stuff. Obviously, the strategy and vision can be very tangible and can be data led, or it can be something quite sort of evocative and sort of on the emotions piece, how they would feel in 5 years' time. How important do you think the data now behind running manufacturing businesses, would you say?
Well, it's one of 6 leadership traits we identify. So the work that I do for the leadership consultancy, Human Alchemy, which is about extraordinary leadership, identified 6 leadership traits.
Yeah.
And the intelligent use of data and having systems and processes are 2 key traits of those 6. So it starts off with being a conscious communicator, having a clear and compelling vision, liberating and enabling your people. The further you go down, that intelligent use of data, has to be there. Sometimes I still feel you have to have an element of gut feel and what feels right.
Yeah.
And if you're using data, you've absolutely got to make sure that data is correct, because I've seen some businesses make decisions on incorrect data, and it's thrown them completely off. So yeah, data, absolutely. You can get data overload, and there is a danger, certainly sometimes in our business, that people are looking at different pieces of data and coming up with different answers. So you've got to make sure that data is centralized, it's meaningful. You mentioned KPIs. I always say to my team, we've got to have KPIs. Visual management is very important, but they've got to be relevant.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, what is this KPI telling us? And if it's not meaningful, well, why waste time putting it together and displaying it? Because you can have information overload on dashboards everywhere, and people think, what the hell is this telling me? It's got to be meaningful, and then it's got to be applied and used intelligently.
Yeah. Apologies for interrupting this podcast with a very quick 30-second description of my business. Theo James are an engineering and manufacturing recruitment search firm based in Durham. We specialise in contract and permanent opportunities, from blue-collar, semi-skilled roles right the way up to C-suite level exec positions. If you're looking for any new additional staff or new opportunity for yourself in the industry, please contact me or the team. There'll be a specialist in your area waiting to help. I'm incredibly proud of this business and what we've built since our inception in 2015, and I would love to extend that service out to you. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Would you mind touching on those 6? Where it says, is it a secret recipe, or can we talk about it?
No, I touched on them there. So it's being a conscious communicator. So again, with human alchemy, when we say being a conscious communicator, it's thinking about how you speak, how you act, how you behave, and how you think, and being very conscious of those things. Then it's the clear and compelling vision that we've talked about. And one of the things, again, as I've said, with vision that people don't do is they don't communicate it. There's no point working on a vision that you're sort of almost like a bit embarrassed to share. Well, why did you do it then? So one thing that I missed out earlier, when me and my team arrived at the vision statement, I went round the table individually and said, do you absolutely commit to this? And without hesitation, every one of them said yes. And I said, well, now I'm happy that we take this forward. We present it externally, and then we issue it. Now it's communicated everywhere. Then you go into the liberating and enabling people. I touched on that earlier about making sure that people are empowered to do their job. There's delegated levels of authority. They know what their expectations are. There's regular feedback. A lot of businesses and a lot of organizations do annual appraisals. Well, I say you should be doing that on a monthly basis. I've had situations where people have come to me and said, I've had enough of Fred. I don't want him in my department anymore. Okay, that's interesting. Well, does Fred know this? No, I've just had enough. Okay, so, have you had any conversations leading up to this about, you need to improve your performance, etc.? No, not really. Well, when did you last do an appraisal? Oh, well, I did his annual appraisal probably about 10 months ago now. Okay, well, let's have a look at it. Doing a great job. Keep up the good work. So what's changed? Liberating and enable people, modeling high performance team working. Then you go into the systems and procedures, and then it's the values, intelligent use of data. So those are the 6 leadership traits that Human Alchemy have identified as being key.
Which I think one of the point there, I'm hearing accountability and all that. The need to make sure there's some form of accountability, and I imagine that's something that is prevalent with your management style, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Again, there's another piece of work we do that is sometimes called being on the hook. I prefer to call it shared accountability, because being on the hook sometimes sometimes conjures up the wrong image for people. But that accountability is absolutely key. But as part of that, it's the rewarding people when they do the right thing. And when we talk about accountability, that doesn't mean to say someone's going to get fired for a wrong
Mm.
decision. When you're having a regular one-to-one with someone, they've got their objectives. How are they performing against the objectives? Oh, actually, you're falling short in this particular area. Why is that? Well, I could do with a bit more help from you on this because I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. Okay, so do you need some training, mentoring? What resources have you got? Then the next time you have that one-to-one, brilliant. You've nailed that bit now. Or actually, you're still struggling. Well, I've given you everything you wanted. What's missing? Oh, well, I could still do with a bit more help. Okay, let's give you a bit more help. But once you've had that same conversation, say 3 times, and you've done everything that you can to provide that help and support, well, then you're into that different conversations. And then it's, look, we're going to have to talk about performance improvement, etc. But it's always geared towards bringing the most out of individuals. I've heard this said loads of times, and I totally believe it. No one goes to work intentionally to do a bad job. Sometimes people they're not clear on what's expected, that they've not been trained or given the support and the resources to do the job. If you're not having these conversations, it's not going to end well. So provided you're having that regular feedback and those regular one-to-ones, people don't mind being held accountable, because the flip side of that is you've held me accountable and I've done a good job, and I'm going to be thanked and rewarded for doing that.
I think sometimes some people battle with, and I have myself in the past, we've given too much effort to the people perhaps who are struggling, and less help the people who are actually doing well. Because I just kind of think, just leave them, get out of the way. But actually, that's not always the right way to manage, is it? Is that a tricky one?
Well, so when I do the work for Human Alchemy, so just to explain, Human Alchemy is a leadership consultancy owned by Lincoln College, and I used to use them a lot when I managed a business in Lincoln. So when I left, they asked me to be a mentor consultant. So what I'm there to show how a lot of what they're talking about is actually applied in business, because I've done it and implemented it. And sometimes the person I'm coaching with is an out and out coach without that level of the manufacturing experience or the experience of actually implementing, but they know all the theory, really good at the theory, really good at coaching. And it's one area sometimes where we have a slightly different opinion, because someone who is an out and out coach will literally want to help and believe everyone can be helped. I take that view that I think you're alluding to there, that you can spend too much time giving those people all the attention, and if they're not engaged and enrolled in the business, and actually they're doing the opposite, and they're almost like a hooligan or a saboteur, I think we sort of call them. For me, when you're running a business and a commercial business, you have to get to the point where you make a decision whether that person is going to stay with the organization or not.
Yeah.
But yes, you've still got to give them every chance, but there has to be a line that you draw where you say, right, we've done everything we can now with this person. It's really not working out. And to be honest with you, Mark, I've never ever seen a situation where someone has left an organization that I've been responsible for under those circumstances that hasn't then gone on and got another job in another organization where they're just a better fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I talked about that agility and things changing. We all know that a lot of people don't like change, but for organizations to be successful, you've got to change. It's one of those things I say to all of my people. It's the only thing I can guarantee is change. And sometimes people are uncomfortable with that, and they can deal with a certain amount of change, but then there may be a change that's made and they just think, you know what, this really isn't for me now. I don't fit here anymore. So I think there is a danger that you can spend too much time, put too much focus on these people. I think a very early conversation that just says, look, if this isn't working out, let's do something and let's move on.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing there is that expectation setting. In terms of, if I think if people know where they're at and they know where you're at with that person, they're not blindsided by you're not performing, you're out of the business. Yeah. That's unfair.
Absolutely, it should never be a surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
Those conversations should never be a surprise, because you've had so many conversations leading up to that, which is the point I was trying to make earlier. When a manager comes to me and says, well, I've had enough of Fred, and said, well, does Fred know this? No, it'll be the first time they've heard it, and their last performance appraisal said they were doing well. Well, this is going to come as a real shock to them. Yeah. It shouldn't be, because they should have had all the conversations leading up to that, including a performance improvement plan, which again isn't an excuse to exit someone from the business. I've spent a lot of money and invested a lot of time with people who have got to the point where their performance needs to improve, and I've brought in external help to support them with that. And it is always with the view to this person is going to get where I need them to be. And if we go through that process and very early on think that's not going to happen, then we have the conversation straight away. And as I said to you earlier, everyone, and I don't want this to come across like, I'm one of these, a hire and fire sort of guy, not at all. But in the length of time I've been in business, I've seen, had quite a few difficult conversations with people, but it's always worked out. Sometimes it's the sheer relief that you've taken all that pressure off them. Yeah. And then, they go and work somewhere else and they do really well. And I've kept in touch with some people who've left under those circumstances. And they've turned around to me and said, do you know, Paul, that was the best thing you could have done for me, to have that conversation. And I'm now working here. I'm doing really well. I learned a lot from the process we went through. So, done the right way, there's always a positive outcome.
Yeah. I completely agree. You mentioned there about innovation and change, and I think manufacturing is changing a lot at the moment, and there's a lot of technology coming in. There's a lot of companies looking at automation, AI, and a lot of companies needing to pivot to be agile, all sorts. But it's also can be quite an archaic type of industry with the people who've worked there for a long, long time and done things a certain way for a long time and aren't necessarily open to that change. Have you come across that before in business? And what would you say are good tips to sort of try to get people on the journey?
I don't think there are any tips.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I've seen that. And I could give you examples of that within my current business. It's quite an old traditional manufacturing process we have. And in some cases, quite a black art where there isn't even some data to support things. It comes back to this all part of having the journey and having the mission, vision, values. The core values are key. You can use examples where someone's positively displayed that behavior or they haven't. And you can actually point out that, look, what you've just done there has actually breached one of our core values. It comes down to always having the right conversations. And if you've got the right framework and people are empowered, then there's every opportunity they're going to succeed. But if over time they're not, then it comes back to what we were just discussing about the discussions about what you expect from them. And the danger is some of those people, especially if they're in quite influential positions, managers within the business, they can influence other people. So when I say no tips, there's no real magic wand. It comes back, changing cultures in business takes time. It's relentless. I say to all of Human Alchemy's clients that I come in touch with as a mentor consultant, this stuff is hard work. If it was easy, every business would just be flying and would have no issues. It's relentless. But once you've committed to going down that route of clearly having your clear and compelling vision, you've developed your strategy off there, you're constantly evaluating it, you constantly, you've got this empowerment structure with your people, you're constantly having those one-to-ones. It will generally correct some of these because they'll actually see, do you know what, actually I want to be part of this, or no, I don't want to be part of this, and maybe it's time for me to move on. So no real tips other than it's all encompassed by everything that we've said before.
Are you seeing things change quite a lot in terms of leadership? Because I've seen a lot of change in leadership styles over the last 10 years. And I think
easily.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because, post-COVID people are demanding more of the job, or what are your reasons? Because I think it's changing for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, COVID has changed a lot of things. I mean, COVID certainly then opens up the debate about sort of hybrid working from home. And that's another completely different debate. And I know a lot of people have different opinions on that. I think the change was coming before COVID, that people were starting to realize that the old-fashioned top-down command and control style of leadership was not working anymore.
Yeah.
And you can even look to some sporting managers. Look at what is it, Clive Woodward with the England rugby team. When they turned a corner and won the Rugby World Cup, it was all about playing to their strengths.
Yeah.
And empowering them to have a say in how they were going to play. And as controversial as Gareth Southgate was, I think he did the same. He got the connection back with the fans who effectively are the customer. You got the players playing for each other, a real lot of teamwork. So those are examples of more modern leadership. And I think we were starting to see examples of it in other areas. And businesses started to, I think, sort of wake up to this. And I had a learning curve when, so I kind of fell into that general management, managing director. Sales was always my background.
Yeah.
So engineering degree, then went into sales. All of my career was sales, loved it, and then had an opportunity to take over at James Dawson and Fenner. And I thought, wow, I've never done this before. And okay, yeah, there was a degree of coaching and went away to Cranfield and did some courses. But I was still of the impression, right, now I've got to be, now I've got to be really tough and tell people how to do things. And we had a situation where we'd had a quality escape at a major customer, and it had really sort of damaged our reputation. And, wow, I was fuming this had happened, and literally was going to fire someone. Right, everyone in the room, and it was going to be literally like an episode of The Apprentice, right? You tell
Yeah.
me why you did this, and
Yeah.
people dropping themselves in it, and right, you're fired. And just before I went into that meeting, I happened to have a conversation with one of the founders of Human Alchemy, a lady called Dawn Barron, and I told her what had happened. She said, "Paul, you need to just stop a minute and have a think. What is that approach going to do?" And I realized it was going to create an environment of a witch hunt and everyone pointing fingers, and there wouldn't be any learning whatsoever. It would just be a case of me going, right, if anyone mucks up like this again, you're going to be for the chop. So what's that going to do? No one is ever going to admit any mistakes, and we all make them, and we're all still learning. And everyone's going to hunker down, and everyone's going to be, self-protective. Everyone's going to go into silos. Worst thing ever. And I realized what I was about to do. So I then went into that meeting and started off by saying, by the way, I'm just going to make it very clear. No one's job's on the line here. We've just got to learn from this. Let's just talk through the process and what happened. And honestly, Mark, a number of things it highlighted that were wrong, and people were willing to explain, well, did you realize that this happens? And that, well, no, I didn't. And that was really the turning point for me to realize that style of leadership, that the route I was going to go down versus the route I did go down, were very different. And again, as I said, that's one of the things at Human Alchemy we really try and coach and bring out. And I think you see less and less of it now. But I think, to go back to your initial question, I was starting to see that before COVID.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Within the last 10 years, only within the last 10 years.
And I love that story, because what we like about that story is, and when you talked about it, I was imagining it. You've actually created a safe environment, an environment which probably could have been a one driven by pure fear of, I've got to say the right thing here, otherwise I'm going to lose my job, versus a safe environment where it links into everything you've just said. It links into that expectation piece. You set the expectations right there and then that no one's going to lose the job, but the expectations still were that needs to be some resolution from this, but it's a safe environment to say what you want to say. And I think that just encompasses everything you talked about beautifully today. And I think there's still a lot of people out there that, because it's very hard to manage, I think, without emotion sometimes, because you're either scared or you're angry or you're sad, and it's very difficult not to lead without emotion, I find. And I think that does definitely come from experience, and sometimes just, like say, taking a breath and just thinking about how you're going to come into that meeting, which is but you definitely see less and less of it. But I think that's a great way to sort of describe that. How do you think your leadership style has changed over the years? Would you say, if there's two things you think you've changed from when you first started out to now, what would you say they'd be?
Well, that example is probably one of them, because when I started out without the experience, I thought I had to have all the answers and couldn't show any kind of weakness.
Yeah.
Whereas actually displaying a vulnerability as a leader is very powerful, and it being okay not to know. And I realized that everyone in the business just assumed you did know everything, and they're really surprised about someone who's saying, "Actually, do you know what? No, I don't know. I want you to tell me." And I've got a situation like that now within the current business, where once we launched the vision, we split it into three clear sections, all about people, products, and processes. And we got cross-functional teams to look at those areas of the business. And I realized quite early on in the process that they saw it as being a test, that the senior management team had all the answers, and we were trying to find out if they could work them out themselves. And it took a long time for them to realize that we were genuinely asking them to come up with the ideas and suggestions that were going to get us to where we wanted to be. The other lesson I think was, and how I've changed is you touched on it there about the safe environment, psychological safety, I call it, and creating that environment where people are afraid to say what they want to say without the fear of repercussions. And from that comes trust. So some of the lessons I've learned, one, you've got to have good people around you. So very early on in my career, I was too slow to make some changes that I needed to make in the organization that I should have made earlier. That was about me having good people around me. And then really having to work on that trust. And again, it's been a challenge in the 18 months I've been at Jonesco. I suddenly noticed there was areas where maybe we didn't have that psychological safety, that there wasn't that trust. And so I had to do a lot of work with that. And you can never sit back and just rest on your laurels. As I said, this is it's relentless.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, something else I've learned is I'm always learning.
Yeah.
And I thrive on that learning. And there's always someone out there that will know something that I don't, and there's someone will have a better way of doing things, or someone will be doing things differently. And that's why I think it's really important to keep that external perspective. Leadership can be really lonely. When you're the top of the organization, sometimes you've got ideas and things that you want to float past someone. And the danger of doing that internally is people can misinterpret that sometimes to you've already made a decision and that's what you're going to do. So you've got to have that external network. And that's why I do a lot of networking with other businesses. I love going and seeing other factories. A couple of weeks ago on National Manufacturing Day, Make UK and a few other organizations got together, and there was 50 of us on a bus going around 3 other manufacturers in the Northwest who opened their doors. And it was a brilliant, oh, look, that's how they do that. And oh, wow, their visual management's really good. That's an interesting KPI. We should look at, and it's that sharing best practice. And it's all good for the British economy that we all help each other.
Yeah.
So I've probably given you more than 2 or 3 that you asked for there. There was a whole load of stuff there, but those are just some things that really stood out.
But it shows how, how reflective you've been on your own career and your management. And that is another lesson, isn't it? That you've got to reflect on what you've done well and what you've done wrong to be able to improve, and not just think the way I do things is the best way to do things. So very quickly, I'm always interested in this. Who's the best manager you've ever had? What do you say? And why?
So there's a gentleman I've quoted several times, and it's a gentleman called Bob Crompton that used to work for Lucas Aerospace, where I started my career. And I didn't work directly for him, but my boss at the time worked for him. And I just remember that my desk used to be very near his office, and he was a really approachable, a really nice guy, and he would come out and chat to us. And I'd been doing a bit of work where I had to have confidence in my own ability, where I'd spotted something that I thought was wrong, and I had to spend a lot of time. I actually came in on a Saturday morning to do a lot of data analysis to get to the bottom of what I thought was wrong. And so as a result, that kind of attracted his attention. We were having a conversation, and he was asking me about what my career aspirations were. Well, I was a young 24-year-old engineer at the time. And he turned around and he said, Paul, the only person who will limit your ability, who will limit your capability is you. And I thought, wow, that really stuck with me. And the guy I used to work for that worked for him as well, he gave me a great bit of feedback. I used to go into his office and say, Jerry, got a bit of an issue and I've had to think about it. And I think we could do this or we could do that, but I prefer to do this. And he go, yep, just go ahead and do it. And he said to me in one of my feedback sessions, he said, I love it when you come to talk to me. He said, because you don't bring me a problem, you bring me the solutions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all too many people chuck the problem up as well. You'll have to sort that out. I've always admired people that are prepared to come and say, look, I'm not sure about this. we've got this issue, but I've had a think, and I think we should do that. Yeah, brilliant. Go ahead and do it. And there's a lot of the time, there's never any right or wrong answer. It's just, being able to justify why you've come to that conclusion and then learn from the consequences, either good or bad.
And that links in perfectly to that continuous improvement culture, doesn't it? If you can have that, again, safe environment where people can not just come with problems, but have the bravery to go, this is a problem, but how about this? And then not be scorned
Yeah,
for, if it doesn't work out, it's on them. Do you know what I mean? That's a,
absolutely. You're all in it together, and as long as well, we know why we made that decision because that was the data, or that was what everything was telling us at the time. It
yeah,
didn't work out. Why? Well, actually, something's come to light subsequently where if we'd have known that,
yeah,
well, maybe we need to just check this, or maybe next time we ought to do that. And we've got it now. We're doing a new project at work now, and we've realised that we overlooked something that we've said. With hindsight, going forward, if we didn't, we need to do this at this stage. Yeah, okay, we've learned something. I used to work for a great guy um, who was parachuted into a business I worked in to help sort of turn it around because it was struggling. And he always used to ask these sort of questions, and someone would come in and answer. He always used to say, "Oh, we've learned something today. We've got smarter today." The focus on that, constantly learning from mistakes, was really good. And again, the accountability. He used to use, I think, it's a golf expression where he said, you can have a mulligan. You can have one bad shot that you go, okay, that was a bad shot. He said, but I don't want to see you make the same mistake again.
yeah,
So no, that's fair. That's fair. I've learned my lesson. I know what I've done. I know what I need to do differently next time.
yeah.
So
Love
there's
that.
a whole number of people, to go back to your question, a whole number of people. I've worked for some great bosses. I could probably count on one hand the bad ones. There haven't been many of them. I've really benefited for working for some great people. And it goes back to your very initial question that I would love to have, when I finally retire, people out there in their careers that say, I used to work for this great guy called Paul Edwards, he used to really care about me. He used to take time to help and develop me and to grow me as a person. And that benefited the organization I worked for.
Now, I've no doubt you will leave that legacy without a shadow of a doubt. And just finally, Paul, in terms of the next sort of 12 months for Jonesco, what's the plans? Much on the horizon?
Well, again, we're continuing that journey of having the vision and the strategy. Strategy is very, very early. We're adding more meat on the bone. We're looking at new product strategies. We're looking at how we differentiate from our competitors. Part of that is looking at some new technology. I'm very fortunate the directors are keen to invest in the business. They just want to make sure it's the right investment. Because we now have a very coherent story. A lot of businesses, when I go back to driving the car analogy, sort of say, oh, this new technology's come out, maybe we ought to adapt that, or maybe we need to chase this customer in this market. But they're all isolated, non-connected bits of activity that don't really hang together.
Mhm.
I feel now with me and my team and talking to the directors and owners of the business, there's a lot more coherence around what we want to do. So we're doing a lot more customer and market research that's then linked to the vision, linked to our mission, putting a bit more meat on the bones with strategies. And okay, we need a new product strategy here because we're losing ground a bit to our competitors. We need to differentiate. Certainly a lot around that sustainability, Mark. I talked about plastics. The plastics industry has a bad reputation, but we can use biopolymers. We can use more recycled material in our products. It might be more expensive to go down that route, but let's take that position in the market. And okay, some people will buy cheaper that don't have that sustainability aspect, but some people will pay for that. So let's target that, and that be part of our model. So lots of exciting things in the pipeline. I've got a great team around me, which is one of the key things that I've always said with any business. Any leader who starts out in a position either with a new company or gets promoted, start with that team and make sure you've got that team of people around you. Build that trust, build that psychological safety. Be prepared to let your team tell you if they think you're doing something wrong, and be prepared to put that handbrake on, or change your mind on things, take a different view. And I've got a great team around me at Jonesco, and as I said, a supportive board of directors that are willing to invest. We now need to give them the right things to invest in.
Yeah, great, love that. And I want to thank you, Paul, for this. It's been tremendous. It's been Exactly how I hoped and thought it would be. I mean, interestingly, when we first spoke was when I was looking to start the podcast. And I think at the time, my vision for the podcast was going to be, it's manufacturing leaders. It was all going to be around specifically management within manufacturing, and the hope we can help by getting people like yourself on improve how people manage. I'm really proud now after 2.5 years that I've had many very different types of episodes on this, and I've added value in different ways. But this one's really brought me back to what the core was with manufacturing leaders and all the stuff we spoke about in terms of that expectation piece, the accountability piece, setting visions, setting expectations. It's actually one I've kind of forgotten that I was asking questions and listening to your answers and thinking about my team and my so-and-so. And that's exactly what I hope, and I'm sure everyone else will have done will be walking or driving or what when they're listening, because ultimately it ties into everyone trying to progress. People listening to a podcast on management wants to bet themselves and bet the team. So this episode will have definitely done that and given people real tangible tips. So thank you, Paul. It's been tremendous. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, and I should add that, when I talked about when I learn and my learning experience, I have watched quite a number of your podcasts. I can't claim to have watched all of them, and I've taken little nuggets and little snippets from a lot of them. So thank you for providing them.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Paul. It's great. Thank you very much for watching or listening to that episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast. I'm sure by now you realize how good diet engineering are as a business and hopefully how good they are to work for. As Maxine kindly mentioned, we've been partnering diet engineering now for 12 months and continue to do so. And we are currently looking for 2 machinists to join their factory in Stanley. As a business, they engineer and fabricate parts for the automotive, defense, and rail industry, and they are growing and doing extremely well. By now, you'll know how good they are as a business and how much you look after their staff. So please get in touch if you are a machinist or know anyone who are looking for new machinist opportunities. But not just machinists. We're always looking for an array of people for Dia. So please get in touch with Theo James to talk about that in a bit more detail. Once again, thank you so much for listening or watching this episode. Have a fantastic day.